You've wandered into Snarky Faith, the place where American Christianity gets skewered, roasted, and served cold. Faith on the fringe, naming what's broken, keeping what matters. Strap in. This is Snarky Faith.
Previously on Snarky Faith.
They say you have seized Venezuela for the oil. Yes, this is true, that there is that which has been brought to the forefront of this earthly battle. But the enemy has sought and was seeking to bring war and to bring conflict through Venezuela and to control the oil of the earth. But the spiritual oil and the natural oil does not belong to the forces of darkness or to those who thought that they could bring a one world order. This is my reset. And the oil of the natural and the oil of the spirit is mine, says the Lord.
For fuck's sake. This is real. This is real. This is real. We're living in a world where somehow this makes sense. We're in the dumbest timeline. Yep. Welcome back to Snarky Faith. I'm your host, Stuart Taloni. Let's talk about what's going on right now. Let's be honest about this, because 2025 wrecked a lot of us mentally. Yep, mental health in the shitter. And we're barely into 2026, and the world is already speed running towards the collapse. Geopolitical insanity is happening. Yeah, Venezuela, like that even makes sense. Yeah, we're watching state violence on camera, officials telling us not to believe what our own eyes see. This is insane. This is insane. And the moral whiplash is so consistent, it starts to feel normal. It's just like a beat. We're always outraged. We're always outraged. We're always outraged. And America isn't heading towards something. We're already in it. And here's the problem. Permanent outrage feels righteous, but it is also corrosive. It numbs you. It drains you. It turns your nervous system into a raw wire, and a raw wire cannot think clearly, love well, or even resist effectively. I've been feeling so afraid, and this year is already off to a shitty start. And things aren't just messy right now. They're unstable in a very specific way. We're being trained to live with contradiction, to accept non-logic, to swallow obvious lies without interrogating them. See, that's not persuasion, that is conditioning. And when reality stays incoherent long enough, people stop asking what's true, and they start asking what is safe. And that is a shift that should scare us. Not because it's loud, but because it's quiet. So here's the permission you didn't know that you needed. Engage, but don't drown. Pay attention, but don't let the algorithm dictate your soul. Log off sometimes. Go for a walk. Touch a tree. Breathe air that hasn't been optimized. Do something stubbornly and stupidly human. Because this isn't apathy, it's maintenance. You can't resist a system that wants you exhausted if you're already empty. If this moment feels wrong, if it feels off in your gut, that is not weakness. That is clarity. Trust that instinct. Protect it. We need people who can still think, still feel, still notice when something is deeply broken. Staying human right now isn't escapism. It's an act of defiance. And that's actually why today's conversation matters on the show. Because when the world feels unstable and your inner world is already wrecked, you don't need more certainty shouted at you. You need a language for what happened to you, a permission to heal. And my guest today, Michael Camp, has spent years naming what so many people feel but don't have words for. The way that high control religion doesn't just mess with your theology, it messes with your nervous system. Again, been there, done that. His book, Faith Funk, walks straight into the overlap between faith, depression, spiritual abuse, and recovery. And it does it without pretending the damage was small or accidental. This isn't about losing faith for the sake of losing it. It's about dismantling beliefs that trained people to hate themselves, distrust their bodies, submit to authority, and call that love. If you've ever felt like a church didn't just fail you, but actively harmed you, and you're trying to figure out how to stay human on the other side of all of this, well, this conversation is for you. So let's get into it. Well, today we are diving into faith funk. This is Michael Camp's definitive retrospective on the Afrocentric musical influences that shaped the Jesus movement of the 1970s. It's a story of tambourines, questionable mustaches, and a theological backbeat that no one saw coming. Welcome, Michael. Welcome to this.
Thank you, Stuart. It's great to be here.
Okay, so yes, Michael, I saw a little deer in the headlights for a couple of seconds, but no. Michael Camp joining me is a former pastor and missionary. He's author of Breaking Bad Faith and host of Spiritual Brewpub podcast. And he's here again to talk about his new book, Faith Funk, which is not a retrospective of the Afrocentric musical influences that shaped the Jesus movement. But no, this is it's a grounded, trauma-aware guide for people trying to make sense of what evangelicalism did to their nervous systems. So
right. That's
welcome,
a good way
Michael.
to put it.
Welcome.
Right. Thank you so much. Yeah. At first I was like, what's he talking about? Well, I did say something about the Jesus movement music, so maybe that's what he's talking about.
Didn't mean to. No. I didn't mean to throw you on any kind of bus. Just having some fun here as we start things off. So this new book, Michael, it's good to have you back. This book is a lot about mental health. It's a lot about your journey, and it's also a lot about deconstruction.
Right.
In all of this process. So what led you to start writing this book? Like, why this book? Why now?
Well, I'd written several books about deconstruction. I really have one that's about my deconstruction, another one that's about my reconstruction, and then my last book was really exposing violence in popular theology. And this one was really wanting to hone in on how to help people, let's say, having healing after deconstruction, because there's a lot of people that struggle. The deconstruction process is very difficult. It can be very rewarding too, but sometimes those rewards don't come right away. And many times people have, let's say, they have imprints on them of harm that they haven't dealt with, they haven't addressed. They've just like swapped out the theology maybe. Okay, that's bad theology. I did some research. Now I believe this differently. But there might be still anxiety, depression, imprints of trauma on people. And so that's what I'm dealing with in the book.
Now, when you're looking at that version of yourself, when you're thinking about, like, as you're beginning to like unravel things within deconstruction, within your belief systems, within like even dealing with a lot of your anxiety that you begin to talk about in this book too, when you look at that version of yourself, like the one that was like at the beginning of this,
right?
What do you wish someone would have told you back at that point?
I mean, I guess one of the things would be that you have this view of the world when you're an evangelical, have a world view, right? That you've been told is absolutely true. You're certain of it, right? And all of a sudden you're questioning it, right? And so I think one of the things is, hey, there's lots of people out there who are questioning this. You're not alone. You know, you're normal. You're having responses that are logical, normal, and at the time you don't realize that, or if you do, you don't want to share it because you think you're the only one. So I think knowing that there are other people out there that are going through the same thing that you're going through, that is really I would have really loved that if I had known. If I had known, I probably would have had a much easier time, right?
That's very true.
Right. So that's probably one of the main things.
Yeah, it's a great point, because I think that like oftentimes when we're part of when we're a bunch of sheeps in some sort of a flock, and you start to have start to have questions, start to feel different about things, start to wonder, and everyone around you isn't having those same questions, or at least they're not being public about them. It's a really lonely place to be.
Yeah, right. It is. Yeah, it's very lonely. It's until you find that there's a community of people doing the same thing, and even people like myself who actually help people get through it. That's another thing. I didn't know anything about that, and And now there's a lot of people, because of they've gone through some experience that's been devastating for them. They want to help other people get through it and make it easier.
Now, a lot of what this new book too that you're going through here, it deals a lot about you unraveling issues with mental health. That was, some of it is your own like familial background that you've walked through. Some of it is kind of your tribal background, is like the evangelicalism as you've walked through that. And I love how honest you are about your journey, and I love the honesty that you bring out, because I think that's so important for people like you're mentioning that want to know that they're not alone in this process.
Right.
What were some of the things for you that started to fray, that started to pull that, like where the wheels started kind of coming off, and it led you to start going, oh, wait, maybe I'm not healthy. Maybe I need to move into something different. What were some of your warning signs?
Well, I think one of the things in the very beginning, shortly after I became an evangelical in my 20s, I was very sincere. I mean, I believed everything. I ran down to the deep end of the evangelical pool, chose the highest diving board, and dove in. And, I became a missionary very soon, just within 3 years about becoming, quote, a believer. And so I think it was all very exciting at first, because I felt like God had touched me and helped me. I met this new community of people, and they were very friendly, and they seemed to be very loving. They had all the answers. They said, we know everything about the mysteries of life, and you should be discipled and grow spiritually and all this stuff. Okay, but as time went on, little red flags would go up. Right? Even way before I started deconstructing in earnest, I was deconstructing, I would say, light. So the little red flags, like, for example, you go to the mission field and you actually meet in real person on the ground Muslims, non-believers, people of other religions, right? And you realize that they have been in their families, in their ancestors, are all been Muslims or some other religion for decades, for generations. And then the task of evangelizing them. And then also when your theology tells you that they're going to hell if they don't convert and follow Jesus or whatnot, however it's phrased, then that doesn't make any sense, because you've grown to love them and become friends with them. And so that was one of the biggest red flags at first was, wait a minute, this afterlife theology does not make any sense. So, but you're afraid to kind of bring it out, right? Because because of the preaching you've heard and because of the way people talk, that you would be labeled some kind of a heretic or something if you didn't believe in hell anymore, right? So, so you didn't really know what to do with that, except saying, I think God's different, but I'm not really sure what to do with that. And then also later on in the churches that I was going to, I started to witness spiritual abuse for the first time. And I saw it in one of the churches I attended before I first went to Africa, and that really impacted me. But of course, evangelicals, we have a way of just saying, "Oh, okay, well, that's a one-off. That's just a church that had an abusive pastor, they would call themselves apostles in that church group."
It's always more problematic.
Exactly.
When they have like lofty titles that
right.
Yeah.
They were in the apostle movement.
That's a red flag in itself.
Yeah, they actually became the New Apostolic Reformation, if you know that term. So anyways, then you realize these people, this is an abusive practice, but you think, oh, that's not all of evangelicalism. Those are just other people that are just got a wacky theology or a wacky position on this. But then later on, I got spiritually abused. I was starting to feel it myself. And that's really when I went into clinical depression, and I just didn't know what to do, because it seemed like very few people were empathizing with what I was going through. And the people who did empathize, some people saw it, and other people would just say, no, you're just imagining things, or you're not really being honoring God or obeying God or whatever. So something like that. So you're labeled as rebellious or something like that, right? And when you're really just recognizing that you're being spiritually abused and manipulated.
So let's go for like a working title on this, because I love how you're mentioning this, and I've been labeled those as well too. Like, oh, you're rebellious for asking questions. You're rebellious for poking holes in this issue stuff that we have here. But when we talk about this, like oftentimes when you talk about mental health, it's easy to talk about what abuse looks like. Like if people we know what we're raised with in the homes and what abuse looks like. But what is spiritual abuse, Michael? Like, what would you give a title to it? It isn't like I touched you in your aura right here, inappropriately. What is spiritual abuse?
Yeah, right. Well, it's really psychological, emotional abuse, like that you might instead of physical abuse, you might see in a marriage. One person, usually the man, might be psychologically or emotionally abusive to his wife, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the same kind of a thing where there's a controlling. They're trying to control you. They act superior. They might be a narcissist, and just whatever they say is right, and they will not, have an agree to disagree attitude or anything like that. So, or they manipulate you. Spiritual abuse can take on many different forms. Like, for example, the apostles that I mentioned, they were spiritually abusing people by controlling them, basically. They were saying, we're the ones that hear from God. You don't have to worry about X, Y, and Z, sounding like they're being nice, but that the people they were abusing were interpreting that as they are controlling us. We're supposed to be missionaries, and they're controlling us, and they're not even listening to what we're saying. They don't really care what we say. And in my case, when I was spiritually abused the very first time, someone was basically a narcissistic personality that was a control freak and was constantly condescending, gaslighting, psychologically abusive, and, treating me like we were, co-equals in a relationship, right? And so everything had to be his way or the highway, right? And so it's just kind of a strong-willed, controlling nature or experience that I went through.
Now, how do you feel about this? Because I'll make a statement. You can tell me I'm being overly dramatic or too extreme in it, but it does feel like in many ways that narcissists are attracted to the pulpit just naturally.
Absolutely.
Can you speak somewhat to that?
Oh, yeah. That's what I say in the book. It's basically evangelical theology is a perfect environment for narcissists, right? Right. It's the more fundamentalist, and especially if the churches are getting into hierarchy and like the pastors, the ones over the pastors, the apostles or the prophets or whatever, they're closer to God, and they have a more of a monopoly on what's right and wrong. Then a narcissist would love to be a pastor because they have that control. Now, there might be some churches where they have, a board that really votes in the pastor. Well, a narcissist probably wouldn't get away with things in a church like that. But if you get in some churches, they don't have that, or they have a rubber stamp board, right? So, the pastor just gets control of the board, and it looks like it's more democratic, but it's really not, right? So you got guys like Mark Driscoll, who's a good example of a narcissistic pastor in a church movement from 10 years ago. What's that?
He's the poster boy.
He is the poster boy. Yeah, definitely the poster, but the bully pastor, right? Yeah. So it attracts it, and it's very unhealthy, and it's amazing how many. When you see a church split or church problems and conflicts, you look carefully and you say, yep, that guy's a narcissist, or that person's a narcissist, right?
Yeah. And it's so sad because also, like, you're dealing with folks that are in situations where they're vulnerable. And when you're coming to this from a position of authority and being able to say, the Lord says this.
Yeah.
Kind of like, thus saith the Lord through me.
Right.
That's that gets into really dangerous territory.
Oh, absolutely. People aren't free to think for themselves.
Yep.
Right. It's like, well, if you think differently than our statement of faith or what the pastor or the apostles are saying, then there must be something wrong with you. Right. So you get into that territory, and there's no freedom. It's just like either get on the bus or get off or get run over by the bus, as some people would say.
When it comes to apostles, I've also noticed, and I don't think this works in all situations, but I've noticed that they don't have much of a sense of humor usually. And in that, to where, yes, I remember, like, if I run into folks that are apostles, I ran into one that was, his title was visionary apostle.
Oh, okay.
And I asked him, and I was like, oh, so how do you attain visionary status on this as well? I mean, I think he may have picked up on my sarcasm and did not much like answering the question. But
That's
some of
true.
it is, they're
true.
just such profound assholes to even give themselves
Yeah.
such glorious titles.
Yeah.
It just blows my mind.
Yeah. They can't take a joke oftentimes. That's right.
Oh gosh. But you spend a lot of time in this book, which I really do appreciate, because I've experienced this in my own life as I've walked through deconstruction, as I've gone through therapy, continue to go through therapy as well. You talk a lot about anxiety, panic, and depression, and I like how I feel like you're teasing out this idea that, like, faith isn't, that, like, having those isn't about failure in your faith. It's pointing out accurately that this is a nervous system response.
Yeah, right.
Between this, because oftentimes I think we can get told, it's like, we can overly spiritualize what's happening in our bodies.
Right.
So can you speak more to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what the church does. It spiritualizes things like depression, anxiety, any mental health problems. Pray more, read the Bible more, get into the church community. Do you have any unconfessed sin? Oh, okay. You still have it. Well, maybe it's you need exorcism. Maybe you're being influenced by demonic forces, or whatever. So there's always spiritualized, and you never really get to the root of it. I think that's a big problem. I mean, people. For me, in the book, I have my own experiences with all of these things. Okay, I got clinically depressed. I had anxiety. I had panic attacks. I was prayed over for exorcism. I was, dealt with all these things, and I weave it into the book. So when you read the story, you're hearing what I went through, and then we'll deal with, okay, this chapter is on anxiety and how I dealt with it and how you can deal with it and how you can get help, etc. So I kind of try to do it like that in a way so it weaves in and integrates the story as well as the practical tools that you can use to overcome these things. So I was dealing with anxiety and depression and, realizing that the church's solution to these things were not working. The spiritual solutions were not working. Okay. Trying everything. And eventually, ironically, I think it was even God that helped me find a solution, but it wasn't God in the church. It was God outside the church, if you want to put it that way.
Absolutely.
So I found this thing called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's a secular solution to depression. And I picked up a book on it. I started reading it. I thought, man, this is amazing. This looks like this could really help. And then in my therapy that I was going to at the time, I was seeing Christian therapists that weren't necessarily against cognitive therapy, but they really weren't prescribing that. So they said, if you want to read that book, fine, but I was really doing it on my own. They weren't really guiding me through cognitive therapy. Right. So that's, a good example. Secular or scientific or psychological solutions that have been tested and work are good. Right. And we shouldn't reject them just because they're not, Christianized or whatever. So that was one of the big lessons that I learned.
Yeah. And like one thing that I've had to learn, and I preach very often, is that most pastors are ill-equipped for being a counselor, even though they try to act as a counselor or a therapist. I mean, you only get so many types of classes in seminary, depending even if you got any at whatever seminary. But the idea that they feel like that they can do this, and they're so sorely unqualified to do that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So if you got on one end of the fundamentalist spectrum, they would say you shouldn't go to a psychologist at all, even if he was a Christian or he or she, and that would be like the real extreme. Oh, only come to the pastor, right? Well, the pastor's not even trained in this. What the heck, Yeah, it's crazy. And then you have people who do go to a Christian psychologist, and that Christian psychologist has, if it's an evangelical Christian, will have evangelical theology that kind of guides them and is their foundation. And sometimes oftentimes that evangelical theology is really a harmful theology that's not really helping people heal. And so I had to go outside that whole world before I really found healing.
Well, it's really difficult when like one of like your core tenets of your base theology is you're born as a piece of shit. You're broken, you're born into sin, and there's nothing you can do about it. You are fucked up from birth.
Yeah.
Like, and once you begin that is that's trauma in itself when you tell people that.
Yeah,
I mean, from day one, yeah.
And it's couched as, the absolute truth. And, because I love you, I'm telling you the truth, that kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's crazy. You deserve punishment. And not only punishment, you deserve eternal damnation because you are a depraved person born that way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And because of Adam's sin and all this stuff that they couch it in. But it's a very harmful belief that people will carry. And even after they've deconstructed, sometimes they'll carry that and they won't be trusting themselves because, on the back of your head, all these people are going, don't lean on your own understanding, and
our ways aren't God's ways. You don't know what's going to happen.
God's ways are different.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel or whatever you think can't be right unless it lines up with the Bible, right? And it lines up with our view.
Absolutely. I feel like that's been some of like, and that's what I was resonating with going through this book of just remembering in my story and remembering, in the trauma that all of the cocktail of trauma that brought me to the place of depression and anxiety and all of this kind of stuff. Some of it was the church. Some of it was my family as well too. And it's this weird blend of things. And we as humans need to realize that there are answers towards healing. And we need to be able to step into those types of answers and look for things that are actually helpful. And that's all that you're talking about in here. You're giving people advice about what to do when they are stuck in these different types of faith funks. I can imagine someone being terrified of losing their faith because of issues of theology and mental health and other things like that. But when people feel like something is breaking inside them, that they're struggling with something, what is the first piece of like solid ground or bit of advice that you would offer them?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think one of the things is to get them to realize that they probably have a fear-based faith, right? Yeah. They've been taught to, like, salvation is really, when you look at it carefully, it boils down to punishment avoidance. Mm-hmm. You're avoiding God's punishment, wrath over your sin, possibility of going to hell, probability of going to hell if you don't become a Christian, right? And if you get people to realize that way of looking at God is so fear-based, and it's just holds them back. Mm-hmm. So if they can get over that, at least they can focus on, okay, if I still believe in God, what kind of God do I believe in? What is God like? And most people gravitate towards the love ethic of Jesus and the love ethic they can see in the Bible. Mm-hmm. And so that would be like a really good grounding for people, is to understand that, okay, if there is a God and he or she is a good God, right? Then what is this God like, right? Mm-hmm. Well, you might say that God then would be like the most loving parent ever, a good parent or a good friend who cares about you, has compassion, etc. Mm-hmm. And so the love ethic that you can see in Jesus' teachings, most people, despite seeing some problems with evangelical theology, they still hold on to that love ethic in some way. So I would focus them on that. And that can be very freeing.
No, that's good. That's excellent. I think I love that too, because it is amazing. It's amazing, like, psychologically, how when we even hear like terms like that we were raised with in the church, our Father, and how we like have this father figure and we associate it with God, and based upon like our familial situations we were raised in, that can be seriously tweaked in different directions.
Right. If you don't have a good view of your own father, that may not work. So you have to, and that's why family of origin is very important. Mm-hmm. Right. And I go into that in my book. It's like I realized, oh, wait a minute. One of my counselors a therapist said, you have aggravated depression. Another one, by the way, said I had PTSD. Mm-hmm. from the spiritual abuse. I was like, I didn't go to Vietnam. What are you talking about? So, but the aggravated depression was basically saying, yeah, you're susceptible to depression because of your unresolved trauma in your childhood or something like that, right? You know, or your relationship with your parents or whatever. So it's very important also to look at your family of origin. What was your family like? Because that can really taint your view of God or view of the world.
And you're taking folks through a journey of kind of saying, like, it's okay. All this stuff has this stuff has happened to you, and it's okay.
Yeah,
This is real, and
right.
this is not how it should be necessarily in the church, but there are tools and there's ways to move beyond that. For you, what does a sustainable, healthy spirituality look like now, and like in your daily life?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me, I have retained what I might call following Jesus's love ethic. But I have rejected so many things in the church because historically and logically and emotionally, a lot of those things don't work, you know. So like the doctrine of hell, the original depravity doctrine, penal substitutionary atonement, I go into that in the book. You know, the inerrancy of the Bible, why that doesn't work. And so all of those are kind of like the four main ones. If when you those would also be related to things like, you know, the way women are treated, the way the LGBTQ community is treated, and so forth. So those kinds of things have to be dealt with, deconstructed, and you find out, okay, there is another way of looking at all those things, even biblically, right? Right? Because, you know, there's mistranslations in the Bible, there's misinterpretations. People are looking at this ancient book and thinking, oh, it's telling us in the 21st century how to live our life, when it's really not, you know.
Yeah.
It's telling some people, so there might be some things, there are some things relevant to us, you know, but that doesn't mean everything that you read is relevant to us. So it's just, people are trying to use it that way. When you get out of that mindset, I think that really helps people be set free from that way of looking at the world and the way of looking at the Bible, etc., and the way God works. So that would be a good foundation.
I love that, because and I want you to speak a little more, because I feel like this is part of your journey too, and it also sounds like what you're saying is there's an evolution into how you hold the Bible, like moving forward, you know, it's where it doesn't mean you throw it away necessarily, but there's an evolution in how tightly you grip to it, or how much you're holding to it, or speak more to that.
Yeah, right. So the Bible's really important to deal with, because people usually look at the Bible as very black and white, all or nothing, right? It's either all true, it's God's word, 100%, totally infallible, inerrant, or if it is, the house of cards comes tumbling down and we can't trust anything, right? Well, it's a very illogical way, and it's actually an unbiblical way to look at the Bible, because the Bible actually critiques itself. I mean, you can find very clearly, even the prophets were critiquing the sacrificial system, saying, no, don't, you know, you guys are hung up on these sacrifices. I don't want sacrifice. I want mercy, right? Just walk humbly with your God and just love justice and love mercy. That's what's important, said Micah and Hosea, right? And other prophets had critiques on on parts of the Torah and other writings. And then in the New Testament, of course, Jesus was critiquing parts of the Torah, when you look at it and get honest with the text. So I think you have to get out of that mindset of all or nothing and realize this at its root, this is a human book, but many people think, the way I put it, is it's got some of God's fingerprints on it. Yeah. So we've got to find out where are those fingerprints. If we believe in God, or we're touched, or we resonate with things in the Bible, well, where are those fingerprints? And then that's fine. We could focus on those, and we can actually help us to expose other things in the Bible that really are quite ugly, right? Yeah. And that's the thing that people aren't willing to do, because they try to harmonize everything, right? Just read the book of Joshua and you tell me if that's a beautiful thing or not. I mean, it's not. That's the Canaanite conquest, when God tells the Israelites to kill every man, woman, child and leave no survivors, including non-combatants, elders, women, children, and even the unborn. This God is not even pro-life, right? So it's just crazy, the contradictions when you give yourself permission to think about it that way. And that's what the church will not give you permission to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And then you asked me the question, what's my spirituality now? Well, it doesn't really matter what mine is. It matters what yours is, what the person who's struggling with this, what they create themselves based on now this new view of the Bible and what matters most in life, and Jesus, maybe Jesus without the evangelical theology. What do you make of Jesus now? And then decide where your spirituality is going to land. If God is a God of love, he's not going to condemn you because you don't have everything exactly right. As a matter of fact, not even evangelicals believe exactly the same thing. There's tons of differences. So why are we surprised if people have different opinions on Christianity and spirituality?
But it's funny that we will fight to say that, but I have the right one.
Exactly.
Out of all of them. That it is I that has this.
But I figured it out. Yeah.
No one else in 2,000 plus years has figured it out, but George, whoever this is.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for your time today. The book is Faith Funk: How to Break Free from Toxic Religion and Reboot a Healthy Spirituality. It is available now on Amazon.
It's available on Amazon, right?
So, Michael, if people are wanting to follow you, stalk you, ask you questions, how do they do this?
Well, the best thing to do is to go to my newer website, faithtransitions.com. And I would love it if you'd put that in the show notes, and people can find my non-religious spiritual direction practice, where I'm a spiritual coach. Okay. And you can see what that's all about, and if it might help people, there's a way to get in contact with me there and connect.
So faithtransitions.com.
Yep.
So that's the new website. So the old one was OnlyFans. Can people still find you on there? Where you do provocative theological
the old one is spiritualbrewpub.com.
Oh, that too. Spiritualbrewpub.com.
Yeah.
The pod as well too.
Spiritualbrewpub.com is the other one. Yep.
Nice. Yep. Okay.
Right.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for being here. And the book is fantastic, and everyone should check it out. Well, thanks so much for listening to Snarky Faith. I know the world may be crazy, and oftentimes it feels like the finale may be near. But I'm here to give you hope. Hope for the end times. Hope for that coming tribulation. Because in the beginning of 2026, I've got a book coming out. That's right, the Tribulation Survival Guide. Your field manual for when faith meets fallout. The Tribulation Survival Guide. How to stay alive when everything else is dead. Be prepared and stay tuned. And here's a preview.
The end times are upon us. The signs are happening. The end is near, but don't panic. You may have missed the rapture, but there's still time to prepare for what comes next. Disasters, plagues, celestial malfunctions. Consider them friendly reminders. Now's the time to prepare. From homemade hazmat suits to heavenly currency and trustworthy prophets, this guide has you covered. Because when the heavens open and the world melts, belief alone won't save you. The Tribulation Survival Guide. How to stay alive when everything else is dead. Coming soon.